Our family's gonna be dispersed. They're
All right, good morning, everybody. Sounds like we are ready to start. Who's running the Zoom? Was it you?
Randy.
Oh, Randy. So today we are, Baruch Hashem, we are starting a new perek. It's going to start exactly. Ayin Gimel and Aleph. It kind of picks up where the previous prakim perek left off. It starts a little technical, and then we will get launched pretty much immediately into some very esoteric Divrei Agada. Okay, so Hamocher es hasfina, one who sells a ship. The Rashbam says again, Hamocher es hasfina stam. So again, you just don't have the greatest attorneys, and therefore you don't have a very clear contract. So what is included in the sale? Machar es ha-toran. You do, all of these terms are going to be defined in the Gemara, but included in the sale of a ship is the mast, des ha-nes, and the sails, vesto ugin, and the
anchors.
the anchors. As we'll see in the Gemara, it's actually interesting. Uga is from Milashon like aguna, like from like gittin. So it's like the anchors. We kind of think of it as like chained, but we'll actually see it's the psukim from Rus and Naami and stuff like that. So that's the ugin are the anchors. That's called a manhigano stuff. All the manhigim, as the Gemara will explain, these are the oars. Avalo machar lo asa avadim, not the crew that serves on the ship. Velo asa martzufin, also not the things that I guess store the cargo. Velo asa antigi, certainly not the cargo itself. Kind of makes sense. But it was mantra amar lo hi b'chal masha b'socha. If you say, listen, I'm selling you this thing and it's fully loaded, it's everything, whatever's in it, then our hare kulan mechurin. Okay, so the Gemara is going to go through each of these terms and describe what it is. Fully furnished apartment. So Toran, what is the Toran? Which again we defined as a mast. It's the askaria. Fascinating. If you just go to the first Rashbam in the Gemara, mast. So I guess that's how you say it in whatever language. So that is the mast. Chenu Omer, and we're going to quote a bunch of psukim. These are psukim from Yechezkel, and I've never learned Yechezkel. I'm embarrassed to say, but I guess there's this parak in Yechezkel deals with certain visions of. I guess there's some sort of reference to a ship, and a lot of these psukim these references are going to be from this parak in Yechezkel. So this pasuk in Yechezkel says, "Erez melavanon lakahu lasos toran alecha." So again, it's talking about the cedar planks, which I guess would be used in a ship for the mast. I will be honest, I actually had to Google what a mast was this morning. I have no idea. Yeah, I don't know. What do I know about ships?
Like the flappy kite hanging on those ships.
Exactly. That's what I learned was the mast. Yeah, exactly. The Rashbam actually is pretty good, but
it just pulled me up.
Yeah, well, the Rashbam is pretty good. Thank you very much. But anyway, Google is that much better. You have pictures and everything. So either way, so that's what the Torah means. Exactly. Nes are the adra. These are the responses. The bilonos. These are the sails. Omer sas berikma b'mitzrayim haya mafreshech liosachal nes. So again, in these psukim in Yechezkel, it's referring to there's some sort of these fancy embroidery things that come from Mitzrayim. That's probably referring to the sails. Ugin. So what are the ugin? So we said it's the anchor. Tanya Reb Chia. Elu uginin shala. Hu Omer, and like we said, we're going to prove this out from psukim. These are psukim at the beginning of Rus. So alahen tisa berna, arashar yigdulu alahen teagena levilti hayos leish. This is Naami talking to Rus and what was the other sister-in-law? Rus? Orpah. Thank you. Basically saying, don't stick around with me. What are you going to wait around? You're going to be, chained but anchored to this marriage. And again, we tend to know this is, I think the source for the term aguna. But again, I guess the technical definition might be like an anchor. Okay, manhigin. We said those are also included. What are the manhigin? So Amar Rav Abba elu amashutin shala. These are the oars. Omer again. These are back in Yechezkel. Alonimi bashan asu mishutayach. Another pasuk also from Yechezkel. V'yardimi anosam kol tov se masot. Again, these are references to strong things that are probably the oars, important parts of the boat. Tanu Rabana. Hamocher es asfina, machar es iskala. So this is ArtScroll says this is the gangplank. The Rashbam says this is kind of like the ramp, which apparently is a gangplank. Again, there was another thing I had to do with. But I guess the ramp to get on and off the boat. That is included in the sale. Vesbar Hamayim, these boats must have these reservoirs of water. That's also included. Shabatocha. Reb Nassan Omer, Hamocher es asfina, machar es abeitzis. He says the basis is included. Sumchas Omer Hamochar Sesfina Machar Dugis. I didn't define these because Amarava basis Hainu Dugis. Two things are actually the same thing. What are they? They are small boats on the larger ship.
Dinghies.
I probably, because of Titanic and stuff like that, I assume these were lifeboats. They don't appear to be lifeboats. They appear to be like these large ships can't get too close to the shore. Is that what a dinghy is? They need smaller boats to kind of help
It's
people.
almost like an inflatable.
It's a dinghy.
All right, so the dugis are the dinghies. Very good. So why does Rav Nassan have a certain word and Sumchas has another word? So Rav Nassan, Rav Nassan came from Babylonia, right? He was from Babel. He was one of the few Tanaim that were not from Eretz Israel. They were from Babel. So I have a Ka'arila Butzis, Geramri Inshi, like they would say, Butzisa de Meshan, the dinghies of the Meshan River. Sumchas, the Eretz Israel, Sumchas lived in Eretz Israel like all the other Tanaim and Ka'arila Dugis, and in Eretz Israel they would refer to these things as Dugis, Gedechsiv, get a reference from a pasuk in Amos, Vacharistan, Beserus, Duga. Okay, that was the technical part of the daf. The rest of this, we are going to launch into the famous Agadata of Rabbi Bar Chana. So as I sent out on the chat yesterday, this was going around various WhatsApp chats yesterday, these next few days of Gemara are going to be these very homiletic, well above my pay grade, as we'll soon see, these Agada. And a lot of Sfarim have written about him. The Gra, I think, is one of the more famous Perushim, and he goes through each one and what it represents. Rav Aaron Feldman, who's the Rosh Hashiva of Ner Yisrael, came out with an English book called The Juggler and the King, where he kind of goes through a lot of these things. And the art scroll has a very I can't say I read it all, but the art scroll has a very nice thing on each of these stories, a little explanation, so a little bit of Shabbos reading. But if it's okay with everyone, I'm going to flip to the English side, and we'll just kind of run through a lot of these stories, really just Aramaic English. But again, there's a lot here in the notes, and there's a lot of reading for those that are interested. So Amar Rabba Barachana, Ishtayli Nechusayama. Those who went, the sailors told me that Haigala the Mitbala Sfina, whenever you have a wave which can sink a ship, a massive wave, and Mischazi Kitusista Denura Chivarta Beresha, it's like a dangerous wave, right? It appears to have these like white fire at its tip. So clearly this is something exactly. So what do you do if you're on the boat and you got this wave that's about to sink you? And by the way, it doesn't appear to be a regular wave. It's got a thing of fire on it. So you can strike it with a club.
They're called white cat.
So you can strike it with a club, the chakik aleh, that is engraved in it, the various shemos of Hashem, Akeh, Asher Akeh, Ka, and Hashem Tzvakos, these three shemos of Hashem. And you also write a main Sela, V'naich. So that's what you should do if you're ever on the sea and you come across one of these waves. Amar Rabba, Rabba the second one, Ishtayli Nuchuzayama, the sailors told me that Bengala, Legala, Plasmea Parsi, there's 300 parsos of distance between each wave. Again, a little unclear. This obviously is not to be meant to be understood on the simple level, right? You see there's not that much distance. These parsos is a major amount of distance, but on some level, there's a lot of distance between the waves. The Ruma de Gala and the height of each wave is Plasmea Parsis, again, it's 300 parsos. And Zimnachara Haba Zilna Ba'orcha. One time we were presumably on a boat and we came across one of these waves. The Lina Gala, and the wave lifted us up so high. We literally saw one of the smaller stars in the, in the solar system.
I think that was from the landing.
Vahavyali, and it looked to me, Kimavazar Arbain Griva Bizra de Chardala. I was trying to say that this area of the star was so big, it was big enough that it could plant this many mustard seeds, which again, the Rashbam says, specifically mustard seeds were chosen because this shows that it's even a larger distance than other forms of seeds. I totally didn't understand it. But the point is very large. The Lina Tfei, had the wave gotten us a little bit higher, have a Makalina Mehavle, we would have been burnt from the heat of this star. But we heard one wave saying to another, saying to its chaver, Chavrasi, my friend, meaning the wave was so big that wave B assumed that wave A destroyed the whole world. And he said, Shabakta midi ba'alma blo shetafte, have you spared anything for me that I can flood? Deneti anavinabde, that I can go and flood? So Amar Le, he said back, Pog chazik vurti demirich, this is well above my pay grade. You got to go speak to the source. You got to go speak to Hashem. If he doesn't give me permission to something, I can't do anything. I can't do anything without his permission. Shenamar ha'osilo tiron Hashem. So psukim in Yirmiyah. Imit panaylo sachilu asher samti chol gevulayam chol kolam lo yavran. Again, it's wave A saying back to wave B, I didn't do anything. Whatever I can give you permission to go crash on the whatever. You got to go speak to Hashem, and then you can do whatever Hashem tells you can do. So again, each one of these stories has lengthy notes that kind of go through. I think the first few are the Gruz Pirush, but there's other Pirushim as well. And I sent you through the art scroll. I think it's called the Ein Yaakov, which goes through various Agadata Gemaras in Shas, and the art scroll, I guess, has translated it all. And the one that deals with these blocks, which is like, by the way, like 80 pages, was going around the WhatsApp groups yesterday. That's what I sent around. So if anyone's interested, you want to print it up before Shabbos, you absolutely can. The third story, Amar Rabba, Lididi Chazili Purman. I once saw Purman Bar Lilis. Purman could be Purman. Sometimes he's referred to as Purmiz. As we'll see, he is some sort of supernatural, some sort of shade-like figure. But I once saw this figure. And Kika right, Akufia Deshur de Mechuza. There must have been some battle going on, and there were some walls, and he is running across the top of these walls. The right, Parsha Kirachiv Chevasa Mitase, and there's some sort of cavalryman on a horse who's running with him. He's on a wall, and some cavalryman guys running on riding a horse. Below Yachale, and one of the two of them couldn't keep up with the other. It's actually a little unclear which one was going faster than the other. Even the Rashbam himself isn't super clear. The way the Bach amends the Rashbam sounds like he's saying that Hurmiz or Hurmin, the shade, couldn't keep up with the guy on the horse. But Zim Nechara Hava Masargan Le Tarte Kudunisa. One time people prepared 2 mules. They were saddled for this Hurmin, but Bekaiman Atre Gishri Deronag. The problem is these mules were on opposite bridges of the same river, which is not super helpful, right? You have 2 mules, but they're not on the same bridge, on different bridges. So Vishavar Mehailahai, Umayhailahai. So Hurman had to jump from one to the other. Not only that, right? It gets more impressive. Benake Trey Mizage de Chamra Biade. He was holding 2 full glasses of wine. Umurik Mehailahai, Mahailahai, and he was like juggling. Right, he was like pouring wine from one glass to the other, from this one to the other. And none of it spilled to the ground. And by the way, don't think it was like a calm day that day. But also Hayom Yalu Shemaim Yerdu Tohomo Sava. It was like a very stormy day, and yet he was able to jump from one to the other and juggle his wine and all of this. This is all the way of saying this was obviously a supernatural person. Until the Malchus heard and they killed him. I think it is worth seeing this Rashbam inside. If you look, this is like, I don't know, 4 or 5 lines from the skinny Rashbam. Hachli Garcinon, Shim'in, Be Malka Vikatlu. So the Rashbam says, Be Malka de Shady. Who was the Malka? It was the Be Malka of the Shadin. She'ain Darko Shal Shade, the Haros of Vidyanim. Clearly, he was doing more than he was supposed to be doing. You're not supposed to be doing, showing everyone that you have these supernatural abilities. But Hargub, Neshahim Megala Sodom. So they killed him because he was being Megala of the Sod. But the Ista Amar, this is the interesting part. What? Oh, I don't know. The Ista Amar, and others say that Beimalka Kesar, this was not this was like a human Kesar that killed him. Shahaya Yare, Shlo Yitel Amalchus Bimenu, he obviously saw this shade and was like, I don't want this guy around. So they killed this shade. Shahaya also shade, Me Adam Haba ala Sheda. This shade was the product of a person who slept with a shada. The Hayadar Bein HaAnashos. He was this like human / shade. I was listening to a shir yesterday, just kind of an interesting point. And apparently this Rashbam is very, very, very famous in a tshuva from like one of the Achronim not that long ago. And the question came, if you have a woman who is Mazana, a married woman who's Mazana with a shade, is she now allowed to go back to her husband? And this all sounds like kind of like funny shilas, but apparently in the Achronim, these were like very real shilas. We don't really know of shadim nowadays, but apparently they were around, and this Rashbam is apparently one of the sources that was used. That clearly this is something that that can happen. That children can be a product of shadim and humans. Okay, moving on. Only the first 2 have ships. That's probably why that's like the bridge. Oh, no pun intended. Happens to be at the end of last parak. The last Gemara was Rabba Bar Rachana. These are all the Agadatas Rabba Bar Rachana. That also could be a bit of a bridge, but from here to the end of today's daf, which is all I've done, and we're going to stop today, which is not the end of the daf, is now we're just going to talk about just massive creatures. So we started with ships, and now we're going to move on to just like massive things. Amar Rabba Bar Khan, Lididi Chazili or Zila Bar Yome. I once saw a young Re'aim. It was a day old. What is a Re'aim? It's one of these mystical creatures in Tanakh. Some of the Mefarshim say that it is a unicorn. So The Havaka Har Tavar, a 1-day-old re'ain was the size of Har Tavar. Har Tavar Kama Havi, all right, how big was Har Tavar? Arba Parsi, it was 4 parsos, again, a very large measurement. Umashcha the Savari Tlas Parsi, its neck alone was these 3 parsos. V'chimar Bata Deresha Parsa Palga, and the resting place for its head was 1.5 parsos. Again, it's a very large thing. And Rama Kufta, when it went to the bathroom, its dung was so big, the sucker lay Liardina, that it was able to dam the Jordan River. So again, there's a very large re'ain. Ba'amar Rabba Bar Chana Lididi Chaziliyahu Arukta. I once saw a certain frog, right? And we're about to do this, a little like Haggadah. So I once saw a little frog. It wasn't a little frog, it was a very large frog. Tahaveki Akra de Hagrunia was the size of the city of Akra of Hagrunia. Okay, but Akra de Hagrunia, Kamahava, how big was that? Sheet and Bati. It was the size of 60 houses. You got a frog that is the size of 60 houses. But what happens? Asta Tanina Bala, some sort of Tanina, some sea monster, some whale. It comes and it swallows the frog. You got to imagine how large the whale is that was able to swallow this frog. And then Asa push Kansa Ubalala Tanina. Then some sort of female raven comes along and it swallows the sea monster. You got to imagine how large. Little joke for those who watched football yesterday was probably too large. Couldn't get his second foot in bounds. Anyone watch the game last night?
His toe.
Couldn't get his toe in bounds. Either way, so this female raven is so large. That was the joke. Exactly. The raven. Very good. So the raven was so large that it was able to swallow this sea monster that swallowed the frog, that hit the dog, that, the whole thing. But either way, and then what did this bird do? V'salik yasiv bi'ilana. Then it flew and sat on a branch of a tree. So the Gemara just says, Tachazik amanafish chele di'ilana. Come see how strong this tree must have been. Amar Papa Bar Shmuel ilah havechasam lo hamne. Had I not seen it myself, I never would have believed something like this. That a bird that big can rest on a tree. Hope you don't have a question because I don't know the answer.
So the raven ate the sea monster that ate the frog.
Exactly. Yeah. That the father bought for 2 zuzim. Exactly. Okay. Once we were in a ship. We saw a certain fish. Again, everything's going to be very large. There was a relatively, a small thing got in this fish's nose. The fish died. But the water ultimately, expelled the fish onto the shore. And the fish was so large, that it destroyed 60 cities because of how the size of this fish and the way it landed on these cities. But 60 cities were able to come and eat from the flesh of this fish. And 60 more cities were able to come salt some of the fish to preserve it, and put it in the freezer. They were able to fill 300 barrels of oil from one of the fish's eyes. The hadron, the basar tracer. And by the way, when we came back to this, when we came back 12 months later, Chazina Navaka Mansri Megarmi Mitalasa Biasmi Limivinu Hanaf Mahuzi. They were able to take the bones of the fish and reconstruct the 60 cities that were destroyed. Again, it's a very, very, very large fish. I think this one I didn't maybe read, but if you look at the notes, it kind of talks about like again, there's a reference and you have to understand exactly the destroyed cities. And some people, when there's destruction, some people took the food and ate it right away. Some people preserved it. Some people. So again, definitely worth looking at the notes and kind of getting a little bit of a deeper appreciation from all these stories. Once we were in a ship. We saw a certain fish. And there was some sand, like a massive fish. Sand seemed, it was, its backside was, I guess, out of the water a little bit. So all of a sudden some sand was on it. The kadach agma leve seemed like almost like a field, a meadow, sprouted on top of this fish's back. So I guess they thought it was dry land, right? So so it was halkinan, ba'afinan, ubashninan agabe. They literally, they went off the boat and they started barbecuing and whatever it is on the fish. But Makad, Cham, Gabe, the fish obviously got hot at some point with all the barbecues. So it turned around and they all ended up in the water. Bilab, Dahava, Makarva, Spinte, had it not been for the fact that our boat was nearby, we all would have been killed because we were dumped in the middle of the water, by this fish. And so we were going in the ship, and the ship is traveling. Being shitza, the shitza de kabar. So you have a fish. It's got 2 fins, one in the front, one in the back. And we were in a ship going across this fish. plus a yoma, plus the leilabasa. We traveled a full 3 days and nights that's how long it took us to get from fin A to fin B. And Ehub is a kipa. The fish, by the way, was swimming against the wind. We were going in different directions. So the fish is swimming this way. We're going that way. And still it took us 3 full days and nights to get from the front of the fish to the back of the fish. Now, maybe that's not that impressive because maybe the fish isn't going that fast. But Yasser Abdimi Amar, when he came, he said that Kamecham Kumkama Demaya, and the amount of time it would take you to heat a thing of water, Misagian sheets in parsa. We went 60 parsos, that seems to be the measurement, the parsa, today's stop. Apparently, it's a very large measurement. So the point is that we're going very, very fast. The Shadi Parsha Gira Bakadmale, as fast as you can shoot an arrow, the ship was going even faster. Amaravashi, Hahu Gildana Diame Habai. By the way, this fish was considered a small fish, the Islay Tray Sites, because when the fish have 2 fins, that's smaller than the fish that have 1 fin. So the point is, this is a relatively small fish, and it was so large that it took the ship 3 days going super fast to go from the front of the fish to the back of the fish. Maybe it was the back of the fish to the front of the fish, either way. Once we were on a ship. Oh, Alan, I guess we're back on the ship story. I didn't even think of that, but we're back on the ship. Zinon Hahu Sipra saw a bird. And it only had its ankles in the water, and its head in the rakia. Clearly, this was a very large bird, but they thought that the water probably isn't that deep because they saw it was only ankle deep. So Armina Lekamaya, probably not that deep. So let's go into the water and cool ourselves off. If I saw this bird, I'd probably stay far away, but they wanted to go into the water. Vinafik Baskala, the Baskal came out, but Amarlan lo to Fisu Hafa. Do not go here. It is super deep. It's so deep that if you drop an axe or someone dropped an axe, it's been 7 years below Kamatya Ara, and it hasn't reached the bottom. So it's not only because the water is deep. The water is also very stormy. Amar Avashi, Ahu Ziz Sadai, who this bird is known as the Ziz Sadai. The Chsiv, Pasuk at Tehillim says, the Ziz Sadai Imadi. Is it really in Tehillim or did I make that up? It isn't Tehillim. Okay. But Amar Abba Rachana, Zim Nachada Havaka Zilna Madbara, once we were in the desert, we saw geese, the Shamte Gatfayu Mishamnayu. Their feathers fell out because of their fat. The Kanagdi Nachle, the Mishlam and Tusayu. Streams of oil were dripping from them. And Amina Luhu, I said to these geese, kind of a weird thing to say to the geese. Weird thing to say anything to geese, but especially this. Islam Megavaichu Chelka La'alma Da'ase. Do we have a portion of you in Olam? They were so fat and seemingly tasty. They were like, can we get a portion of this in Olam Haba? Chada Dali Gatba, one of the geese raised its wing as if to say, like, you get the wing. The Chadali Amta, Chada Dale Amta, one of them Atma, one of them raised its thigh. In the future, the Jewish people were going to be held account because of them. I think it's Kedai to just see the Rashbam inside and then we'll stop. But the Rashbam, what does it mean? The second to last line, because of our Chatay, we are withholding Mashiach. And these things, they are so big that clearly they're under a lot of Tsar Balechaim, La'usan, Avaz, and Machmas, Shona. So the point is, when ultimately Mashiach comes, we will get to enjoy these fish, but at least for now, it's kind of because of our Chatayim that they are in the pain that they are in. We'll pick this up on Sunday, and we'll go through, I think, the rest of the Agadah.